Unit 2 here. During this conference, we're going to be looking at the Futato exercises from last week, and there was a little bit of confusion in Unit 2. The Futato exercises are labeled Unit 1 exercises, but they are over Chapter 18, so that should be Unit 2. So those exercises that are there, even though they're labeled as Unit 1, they are the correct ones, so you can go ahead and do those. I'm still waiting to hear back. There was some trouble with one of the digital lessons, so I'm waiting to hear back from the course designer on that one. But I'll keep you posted. Pardon me, my coughing and my voice. I don't have a cough button here, but I'm getting over a little bit of a sinus allergy issue. So hopefully that's not too distracting. But what we'll do here is we'll go through focusing on some of the trickier spots or some of the more confusing things in these exercises. And hopefully as questions come up, you can ask those in the chat. I'll go over them, but hopefully that'll be helpful. And then any other questions that you have, we can deal with as well. I didn't receive any questions from any students to go over during this session, so we're pretty flexible on what we cover here. So activity A, let me just take a look at the assignment, make sure I know what we're doing. So activity A, 1 through 12, and looks like we're just doing translation. So this is asking to focus on the attributive demonstrative pronouns. Again, demonstrative, these are pointing pronouns. So this, that. The near demonstrative would be this or these in the plural. The far demonstrative would be that or those in the plural. And basically this section here, that demonstrative is going to be functioning as an attributive. So sometimes we refer to this as the attributive demonstrative, or not attributive. We refer to this as the demonstrative adjective rather than the demonstrative pronoun, because technically it is an adjective here. The demonstratives are adjectives that can function substantively, and when they do, they would be pronouns rather than adjectives. But here it's referring to it as an attributive demonstrative pronoun for some complicated reason, apparently. It would be better to just call this an adjective. But as we go through here, just translating one word at a time. Hape, hazeh. So here we've got pe, which is mouth, the mouth, the this. Again, ze here is going to be your masculine singular. Anytime you have a segel he, a noun or an adjective ending in segel he, actually I don't know that you'll have an adjective very often ending in segel he, but anytime you have a noun, it's going to be a masculine singular ending. We're used to comets he being a feminine singular ending, but segel he is often masculine singular. So hape is going to be the mouth, masculine singular. Hazeh is going to be the this, masculine singular. So to translate that attributively, it would simply be this mouth. Again, for this adjective, it matches its antecedent. It matches its antecedent in definiteness as well as gender and number. So this next one here, hamishpacha, hazot. Again, here we've got hamishpacha is the definite word for family or clan. Hazot is the feminine singular demonstrative, and so this would be this family or this clan. Excuse me again. Number 3 here, ha-oyevim, ha-ele. Ha-oyevim, ha-ele. This is going to be enemies, plural, masculine plural form, the enemies, the these. Ele is a form that is basically whether it's masculine or feminine. The plural demonstrative, sorry, the plural near demonstrative is always going to be ele. It doesn't change for masculine or feminine. The translation here then would be these enemies. Number 4 here, harosh, hahu. Now, I'm sure this was covered in the chapter, but here for the far demonstratives, Hebrew doesn't actually have a unique far demonstrative. It has to borrow the independent pronoun, independent subject pronoun. So you might see this and translate it literally as the head, the he, but again, we're using this independent pronoun as a demonstrative. So because it's a far demonstrative, it would be that head. It might be that chief. Rosh can be a lot of different things. Head, chief. Sometimes it can even be like start or origin, source. So that's what we've got here, that head. Number 5, habat hahi. Again, this is a far demonstrative. We're using this, what we would normally say is she, but when it's got the article here, we know that this is functioning as an adjective. And so habat is going to be the daughter, that one feminine, and so we just translate it as that daughter. Number 6, we've got ha-evadim, ha-haim, ha-evadim. This is going to be the plural, masculine plural form of eved, which is servant. And then ha-haim, we might think is haim from they, but this is used as a far demonstrative here, so that is going to be those servants, because this is the plural form. Both of these are plural, so masculine, plural on both of these. Number 7, ha-Torah, hazot. Both of these are singular feminine, and so we've got the instruction or the law, this one. Excuse me. And so we would just translate this as this law or this instruction. Number 8, habain, hahu. Habain is going to be the son. Hahu is going to be that one. Both of these are masculine, so this would be that son. We don't need to include the words the in our English translation because the demonstrative actually definitizes the noun in English. So we don't need an extra definite article. Halechem, hazeh. Halechem, hazeh. This is going to be the word for bread. So the bread, this would make it this bread in English. Number 10, hamilchmot ha'ela. Hamilchmot ha'ela is going to be the battles, these. So these battles would be our English translation. Number 11, ha'anashim hatovim hahem. Ha'anashim is going to be the men. Hatovim, the good ones. The men, the good ones. Those. So here again we've got haim, which usually means they, but because it's functioning as an adjective, it's a far demonstrative and it's plural. So this would be those good men in English. And number 12, haregel hatamea hahi. So here we've got a segulate noun. The segulate noun doesn't have an obvious gender ending, but many, many segulates are feminine, even though they don't have a kametz he ending or a pataktav ending, and so, or a segeltav ending. And so we can tell that this is feminine if we don't remember our vocabulary by the adjective that's modifying it. So the adjective here, tameh, has the kametz he ending, so tame'ah, and it also has the definite article showing that it's modifying the definite regel. And regel, I'm almost certain is foot, but it's slipping my mind right now as I speak this out loud. But I'm pretty sure this is the, so tameh is going to be, and I always get tameh confused with, tahor. Tameh is impure or unclean. So we've got the unclean, the foot, the unclean, that one. So that unclean foot. Now, you might be tempted to translate this predicatively, so that foot is unclean, or that is an unclean foot, or that is the unclean foot. But remember, as long as our all of our words here are definite, then it's attributive. Attributive means that these all modify one another. So this is not predicative. This is not a predicative construction unless we've got an indefinite adjective or pronoun with a definite adjective there. So, all right, well, that's section A. Section B is going to be 1 through 9. You just check over here and see if we have any other questions. All right. So B. Let's look at this. We've got, so these are going to be set up in a predicative relationship. So we will not have definite articles on our demonstratives here. You'll also notice, for the most part, on the predicate construction, the pronoun is going to precede the adjective or the noun that it's in a relationship with here. So, number 1, we've got ze habayit. Ze habayit. So we're going to have this, the house. This is the house. It's not going to be this house because we're missing a definite article over here. So this is not attributive. Rather, we're going to have this is the house, or you might say temple here. Number 2, zot ha'ish. Zot is our feminine singular. Zot ha'isha. Zot is our feminine singular demonstrative, near demonstrative, and ha'isha is woman, so that's going to be this woman. Number 3, Ela ha-devarim. It's going to be, or sorry, I forgot to make this predicative up here in number 2. This is the woman would be our translation. Number 3, Ela ha-devarim. These are the words. I think this actually might be the Hebrew title for Deuteronomy. I'll have to look that up. Basically, in the Hebrew scriptures, the books are named after the first word or the first couple words. So Genesis is called Bereshit in Hebrew. I think Ela ha-devarim might be the title of Genesis in Hebrew, but I'll have to check that. Number 4, hu haderek. Hu haderek. This is going to be the masculine singular pronoun, and so this is a far demonstrative. Haderek is going to be the way or the road. So we would translate this as that is the road. Number 5, he hamelchut. He hamelchut. This he we would normally translate as she, but she is the kingdom is not proper English. So we would say that is the kingdom. You could technically translate this, it is the kingdom, but context would have to tell you whether or not that's a more proper translation. So that is the kingdom, especially in the context of learning the demonstratives, would be our proper translation here. Haim ha-sephrim. Haim ha-sepharim. Excuse me. Haim we would normally translate as they, masculine plural. But here it's in a construction with ha-sepharim, which is going to be the books or the documents, the scrolls. So this would be those are the scrolls. Number 7, zot ha'aretz. Zot ha'aretz. Zot is our feminine singular near demonstrative. Eretz does not give us an ending that indicates feminine, but again, these segolets are often feminine without a kametz he or segol tav ending. And so for zot ha'eretz, we get this is the land. Number 8, Ela hanashim. Ela hanashim. Ela can be masculine or feminine. It is plural, so we would translate this as these are the women. Hanashim is the women. Then finally, number 9, ze hamelech. Ze hamelech. Ze is our masculine singular demonstrative, near demonstrative. So we would have this is the king. All right, so that's it for section B. Take a look here. I am not sure where there we go. All right, section C. Let's take a look at the assignment, make sure I know which ones, 1 through 10. All right, so here you're primarily going to be determining which use of the demonstrative is taking place here. Is it being used attributively as an adjective, or is it being used predicatively as a pronoun? And so you'll also want to parse out the gender and number of the demonstrative as we go through. So it's giving you number 1 here, ha'isha, hazot. Both of these have the definite article, so that's going to be attributive. Furthermore, the demonstrative comes after the word it's modifying, so after usually signals attributive. Both are feminine singular. Number 2, ze ha'adam. Ze is the masculine singular demonstrative, and since it lacks the article, it's going to be a predicative use, and so we would translate this is the man, so predicative, masculine singular. Number 3, again, we've got the article on the demonstrative. Ham is be'ach, hazeh, so that is going to be an attributive relationship. This altar. This altar would be our translation. Number 4, habat hahi. So here again, we've got the definite article on our demonstrative, as we do on our noun. So this will be attributive, and it is feminine singular, as is our noun. Habat hahi is going to be this daughter. Sorry, actually, he is going to be our far demonstrative, that daughter. All right, number 5 here, we've got Ela ha'elim. Ela ha'elim. Ela could be masculine or feminine, so it's going to come down to the noun, but it does not have the definite article, so we know that it's going to be predicative. The noun, elim, is the masculine plural form of God, so this will be gods, masculine plural. And with it being predicative, our translation, I know he's not asking for the translation here, but our translation would be, these are the gods. Number 6, ha-begadim, hahem. Here we've got the article on the demonstrative, so this will be attributive. Haim is going to be a masculine plural, and it's the far demonstrative. So we're going to have those garments. You could say those garments, or you could say that clothing if you want. Even though that is singular in English, clothing is a non-count noun, and so we usually use singular adjectives for non-count nouns in English. But it's important to understand that haim is plural, masculine plural. So you would have adjectival masculine plural here. And again, we would translate that either as those garments or that clothing, something like that. Number 7. Number 7, we have harosh hazeh. Harosh hazeh. So here our demonstrative has the definite article, so it's attributive. Zeh is masculine singular. It matches rosh in gender and number. So what we have here is this head, or this chief, maybe. Number 8, zot hamalchut. Zot hamalchut. Zot is going to be our feminine singular demonstrative. It does not have the definite article, so this is going to be a predicative construction. And so we're going to have this is the kingdom. This is the kingdom. Number 9. Number 9, we have ha'ohel, hahu. Ha'ohel, hahu. So here we've got the adjective on the demonstrative, so it will be attributive. And who is going to be our far demonstrative. It's going to be feminine singular. So we would say that tent. Ohel is our word for tent. So that tent. Number 10, ha aratsot. This one is tricky with how many syllables you've got going on here, but it's from eretz. Again, eretz, whenever we add on to eretz, the initial segel often goes back to an A-class vowel. So when it's singular, we have ha'aretz. Here, when we have it plural, we get aretzim. So not aretzim, aretzot rather. So the definite article on it will be ha'aratzot, ha'ele. Ha'aratzot, ha'ele. Ha'ele is our demonstrative. Could be feminine or singular depending on the noun. Here we've got a feminine plural ending, so we know it's feminine. So ha'ele is feminine plural, and since it has the article, this will be an attributive construction. So the way we would translate this would be these lands. All right, these lands for number 10. So that's section C. Next is D, numbers 1 through 9. All right. So these are just translations, not necessarily any demonstratives. These are focusing on the relative pronoun. Again, the relative pronoun in Hebrew is really flexible. There's probably about 12 different words in English that can translate the relative pronoun in Hebrew. So you just want to be flexible in that. You can use that, who, which, what, lots of, it's sometimes even, I think sometimes even when, depending on the context, a lot of different options here. So we just kind of have to read it through. And you have to understand what a relative pronoun does in just English grammar to kind of open up the possibilities for English translations. So number 1, we've got Hamelech Asher Hamelech Asher Malach. So what we've got here is we've got the noun Hamelech. This is a definite noun, masculine singular. And then we've got a verb here. Malach is the Cal perfect 3ms form of mem lamed kaf. And so as we translate here, we've got the king who reigns. You might say the king which reigns, but which usually is used for impersonal nouns in English. So as a personal noun, a king is a person. We would say the king who reigns. Depending on the structure here, again, it might be worth doing a whole lesson on relative pronouns and relative clauses in English, because they're, generally speaking, in most in usual conventions in English, there's a difference between when you use the relative pronoun which versus the relative pronoun that. Which is used in what are called non-restrictive clauses. That tends to be used in restrictive clauses, and we can get into what those terms mean. But the difference between translating this, the king which reigns, and the king that reigns, comes down to the broader context in Hebrew. So at this point, you would still say either, you wouldn't say which, really, you'd say the king who reigns, or the king that reigns, perhaps, depending on the context. Number 2, Ha'isha Asher Shalcha. Ha'isha is going to be our noun. This is a demonstrative, the woman. Who, Shalacha, this is our third feminine singular form of the Cal perfect shalach, which means Shalacha would be she sent. So the woman who sent. Number 3, Hanavi'im Asher Amaru. So Hanavi'im is going to be the masculine plural of the prophets. Who. Amaru is going to be the third common plural form, Cal perfect, of Aleph Mem Resh, which is Amar, or he thought, he said, he affirmed, he mentioned. So the prophets who spoke, the prophets who affirmed. Often for spoke, you'll have davar rather than amar. Spoke and say. Amar tends to be say. Davar tends to be speak, but that's loose, depending on context. But amar could also be think. It could also be mention. It could also be a few different things. So the prophets who thought, the prophets who mentioned, something like that. The prophets who said, usually we would begin a direct speech clause after that. Number 4, Hakesef Asher Babayit. Hakesef, this is the definite form of the word for silver or money. So the money which in the house, again, we know that this is definite because our bait preposition for in has the patak under it, indicating a definite article. So in the house, the money which in the house, well, that makes sense in English. We have to supply a to be verb to make this a verbless clause. This is a verbless clause, but to translate it in English, we have to supply the verb. So here we would translate this, the silver which is in the house. Number 5 here, makomot asher av. Makomot, this is going to be, makom is place or location. So this is going to be places which, yeshav would be he dwelt. Places which he dwelt. This would be a situation where you can either translate this as places at which he dwelt, places in which he dwelt, or you could translate asher as where, places where he dwelt. Yeshav could also be he sat. So places where he sat, places in which or at which he sat. Again, asher could be very flexible in how it's translated. Number 6, we've got hazahav asher lakach. Hazahav, this is going to be the demonstrative form of the gold, which lakach is going to be he seized or he took. So the gold which he took. The gold that he took, depending on the construction. So if I wanted to say something like, the gold which he took is shiny, well, all gold is shiny for the most part. So the gold which he took, the statement is shiny is not restricted to the gold which he took. He took, this relative phrase, he took, does not restrict the description of is shiny. Is shiny is not restricted just to the gold he took. So this would be a non-restrictive use of the relative pronoun, in which case we would use which. But if I said, the gold which he took is missing, well then, which he took, not all gold is missing. So is missing, the phrase is missing, is restricted to this relative clause, and so that would be a restrictive use of the relative pronoun, in which case we would say, the gold that he took is missing. So again, in Hebrew, we don't have any other context, so either translation is fine, but it's important to understand the difference in use between which and that for English relative clauses. And if you, just a simple way, I mean, it's probably oversimplified here, but just a simple way is to take the full, the full sentence, the phrase, the relative phrase with the phrase following it, and just say, does this apply to all of the subject? So does what's being said here apply to all gold? The gold which he took is shiny. Does is shiny apply to all gold? well, then this is not a restrictive clause if it does. However, if we say the gold which he took is missing, does his missing apply to all gold? No. So here this would be a restrictive use. And therefore, with the restrictive in English, we use the word that. Whereas with the non-restrictive use, we use the word which. All right, so if that confused you, don't worry too much about it. Again, that's English grammar. It has nothing to do with Hebrew. It's not something that was probably covered in the chapter because, again, these are English conventions, but just something to be aware of if you want to produce a good translation, you need to know good English convention is my whole point. All right, number 7. Zevachim esher al mizbeach. Zevachim is the masculine plural word for sacrifices. So zevach is going to be the noun with a segel and what I believe would be a patach here. But zevachim is the plural form. So sacrifices which... And again, you're usually pretty safe as you translate through just using which as your default here, because which is probably the most flexible of the English relative pronouns. And then as you realize, oh, that doesn't make sense, you can kind of modify it. So sacrifices which al is upon, mizbeach is going to be altar. So again, it's important to realize this is not definite here, so this would be upon an altar. We have a tendency to translate altar as definite, the altar, especially with upon in English, but this is not definite. So sacrifices which upon an altar, this is a verbless clause in Hebrew, but it doesn't make sense without a verb in English, so we're going to supply it to be verb. Sacrifices which were upon an altar. I should also make a note here about verbless clauses just for your own information. Again, you're not going to be tested on this, but verbless clauses, sort of our default verb that we supply in English is the to be verb, but that's just a default. Sometimes context will allow you to supply a different verb than just is, was, am, are. Now, I should probably give you an example if I'm going to make that point to illustrate what I'm saying. But there are a lot of verbs in English that can function as what we call copulatives, which basically means you're going to have a predicate nominative. Basically, the predicate is an adjective for the most part. And that adjective is predicating something about the subject. In English, some verbs that work this way, and you can kind of tell whether or not a verb works this way by setting it up with an adjective in the predicate. So, for example, I might say, let's say in Hebrew we have, let me get my Hebrew going here. Let's say we have ha-kohen, let me think of sort of a temporary, let's just do something like zakein, right? Okay, so if we have ha-kohen zakein, we don't have a definite article on the adjective. We could also say this as zakein ha-kohen. So this indicates that we've got a predicative relationship here. The priest, old. We've got an adjective here for old. Now, we could either translate this as the priest is old, which would be sort of the default way of saying it. But in English, there are other options. Now, you got to be really... I probably shouldn't even go off on this tangent because I'm probably just going to give you opportunities to get confused. But, for example, the priest looks old. The priest old old really only works with look, but I might say something like the dog is hungry, or I might say something like the dog looks hungry, or the dog these are all stative sort of ideas. I can't quite do like sounds. What are my limits here? The dog. Oftentimes looks will function as a sort of copula. Maybe I should, I'll think of some other examples here. One reason to pull out this distinction is because look is not active here. Look is a sort of stative use of the word look. The priest himself isn't looking. He has the quality of looking. He looks old in this case. Another one would be like fell sick. So we could say that the priest was sick, or we could say the priest fell sick, something like that. The whole point I'm trying to make here is when we have verbless clauses in Hebrew, good English with supporting context may use a word other than just is, am, was, were. So if you come across an English translation of the Bible and you see a different verb besides a to be verb, and you realize it's a verbless clause in Hebrew, I just want you to say it's not against the rules to use the context to kind of express the missing verb, the elliptical verb, a little more colorfully or clearly, as long as you've got supporting context. Enough said about that. Again, sorry for bringing that up if it's confusing. It's just as I run into these little concepts that you don't learn directly, you just kind of learn by habit, you learn by practice, you learn by translation experience. I want to kind of share them because if you can learn them sooner, they may be more helpful to you. But again, that's not anything you're going to be tested on, just an idea to kind of keep in mind there. All right, so we'll move on to number 8 here. Halechem asher echal. Halechem, again, the bread which echal he ate. The bread which he ate. Again, depending on the context, this could also be the bread that he ate. So the bread which he ate was gluten-free. Probably not. Maybe they used barley, I guess. You had some, I think barley's gluten-free, I'm not quite sure. I'm sure they have gluten-free grains in ancient Israel. Probably not going to show up in scripture, gluten-free. But the bread which he ate, actually that doesn't quite work because clearly not all bread is gluten-free. But you could say something like, the bread which he ate nourished him. Because generally speaking, nourished him is not just going to be restricted to the bread that he ate. All bread would conceivably be nourishing. However, if you said the bread which he ate was stale, well, then you would probably need to use the bread that he ate. Because was stale is now restricting specifically to the bread that he ate. Not all bread is stale. So again, that's the difference in English between the restrictive relative clause and the non-restrictive relative clause. Number 9, banim asher yatz'u. Banim, this is going to be the masculine plural form of son. So sons, and since we've got a personal noun, I'm going to go ahead and just go with who and see what happens. Sons who, and now yatzah. Sorry, not yatzah. Yatza'u is going to be the third person common plural form, cal perfect, of yatzah, which is he went out. So this is going to be they went out. sons who went out is going to be our translation there of D. So I'll check and see if there's any questions here about that. No questions so far. Let's look at our assignment. That was D, I'm sure, right? Yes. So now the assignment jumps to activity G. Activity G numbers 1 through 8. So G is just translation here. And again, since you have the translation, I'm just going to focus on pronunciation here and maybe how I would approach the sentence in order to translate it as far as what I'm looking for. Again, in the beginning, before you start recognizing, ha'av right away as, the Father, before you start recognizing et over here as indicating a direct object, you're going to need to go through and figure out what are my verbs, what are my nouns, and the only way to do that is to figure out what the word actually is first. So this is a great example of that. You might not look at banu and immediately recognize what part of speech this is. You might see the bait and the noon here and thinks it has to do with son, maybe, ben. So until you recognize more, you might have to do this just one word at a time. But I don't recommend figuring out what the first word is, writing it out, figuring out what the second word is, writing it out. Don't translate that way. You can go ahead and write out each word as you figure out what it is, but don't write it in stone. This isn't your translation yet. You want to know what words you're working with, and then you want to figure out how they go together in your translation. So again, you've got translations over here, but I'm going to focus on pronunciation. I'm going to focus on how to group these words together. So the first word here, like I said, well, we've got banu. I don't recognize banu as a vocabulary word. So what vocabulary words might it be related to? Well, again, I do recognize the beit nun for son, but I don't really get beit nun with a shurik. If this was a hulam vav, I might have his son, but that doesn't really work here with the shurik. So it's got to be something else. Well, we do know in Hebrew, often a sentence will begin with the main verb. So is that what we've got here, banu? Well, we've got 3 consonants, kind of, if we ignore the fact that the shurik is a vowel. But we don't know any verbs that have a vav in the 3rd root letter. So the vav here probably is not part of the root. If this is a verb, the vav is probably a suffix. Well, that means that we've got a missing root letter somewhere, because we've only got 2. That means we've got a weak verb. So of the types of weak verbs that we've looked at so far, what makes the most sense here? Is this a one noon, where maybe we've got the noon, bait, noon, where perhaps the noon is assimilated into the bait, as indicated by the dagesh here? Perhaps that's what we've got. Of course, the problem is one noons only tend to assimilate when you've got a prefix, and there is no prefix here. So that doesn't seem to be the case. Is this maybe a one yod? Well, we haven't had one yod and one aleph yet. The only ones we've had are one noon and one hey, or sorry, one noon and third hey. So let's try third hey. Well, the way that the third hays work is essentially 3 different things can happen. 1, the hey can stay where it is. In the Cal Perfect, this happens in the the third masculine singular form. We get bana, if this is the third hey. This also happens in the imperfect, any of the imperfect forms that do not have a suffix. Of course, the hey, the vowel preceding it shifts from a kametz to a segel in those cases. But either way, we don't have the hey, so that's not what's happening here. The other, the other option for third hey verbs is the hey can shift to a hirik yod. This happens when we have a consonantal suffix added to the third hey verb. So, in the perfect, that would be, for example, the second person, masculine, feminine, singular, where we have the tav suffix added. That kametz hey is going to shift to a hirik yod. So we get something like banita or banit. But again, we don't have a hirik yod here, so that's not what's happening. The third thing that can happen with a third hey is that the hey can drop out altogether. That seems to be what's happening here. And when the third hey drops out altogether, that's because we've got a vocalic suffix. Well, what do you know? The shurik is a vocalic suffix. So that makes perfect sense. What we've got here is bana, but it's a form of bana that has a shurik suffix and no prefix. Well, if there's no prefix, that means it's not imperfect. So this is most likely a cal perfect, cal because we haven't had other stems yet, a cal perfect, and in the perfect conjugation, which conjugation uses a shurik suffix? Well, that would be the 3CP. So here we've got a cal perfect 3CP form of bana. Bana means he built. So banu would mean they built. And so now we're looking for a subject. We're looking for either a plural subject or a compound subject. Now, if you want to call a compound subject plural, that's fine. But we know that we're looking for more than a singular noun for our subject because we've got a plural verb. So let's keep going. Generally, we've got our verb first, then we have our subject. Let's see what we have here. Next word is ha'av. Well, ha'av, I see a hey, which often tells me I've got a definite article, and then I recognize av because it's a very basic vocabulary word. So here I have the father, but this can't be the end of my subject because the father is not plural and my subject is plural. My verb is plural. So what else do we have here? Well, I have the father, the haben. So ha'av the haben, this is a compound subject, the father and the son. So this can serve as the subject of banu. The father and the son built. Generally in Hebrew, we now have, barring any sort of modifying phrases on the subject, we now expect to find our object. And sure enough, we have et marking our definite direct object. Our definite direct object is habayit. So we can now tell that our definite direct object is the house, and now we have a modifier on house. Technically speaking, hazeh could modify either house, son, or father, because all of these are masculine singular. So which one does it modify? Well, when it can modify any of these, chances are it's modifying, again, generally speaking, the attributive adjective is going to come after the noun it modifies, and usually proximity gives it away. So here, this construction would make way more sense as the father and the son built this house than to say something like this father and the son built the house, or the father and this son built the house. If hazeh was modifying one of these, it would be much closer to one of these. So that's sort of the structure to follow here, and of course we get the father and the son built this house. So I'm not going to take that much time through all of these, but I wanted to kind of just give you sort of my strategy for how I attack. Next one here, we've got lo rather than beginning with a noun. So it's good to look at lo and figure out, again, okay, what is lo modifying? Is lo modifying the verb? Is it modifying the subject? Is it modifying the direct object? Or is it modifying some other modifier? Well, here, our next word, tigah, looks like a verb. The problem is we've got a hirik patak pattern. And that is not what we expect to see in a triconsonantal strong verb. So we've got some sort of indication that this verb is probably not the root tav gimel ayin. Because even if we knew the PL stem, which has a hirik in R1, it's not that because it would have a sere here. So how do we account for the hirik and the patak here? Well, one way to account for it is to recognize tav hirik as a prefix. That would tell us that we are in the cal imperfect. But then we've only got 2 letters left, and we have to figure out what happened to our 3rd letter. So again, so far we've learned 1 noon and 3rd hey. Could it be that the 1 noon has assimilated into the gimel of R2? Or could it be that the 3rd hey has disappeared? Well, when there's no suffix, the 3rd hey stays. So this is not a 3rd hey. This does make sense as a 1 noon because that's really the only way to explain the dagesh and the gimel is an assimilated noon. Since the gimel is preceded by a vowel, there's no reason for it to have a dagesh lene, so this must be a dagesh forte. And the 1 noon would explain that. So here we've got a cal imperfect, either 3FS or 2MS of Naga. And then the rest of it is pretty straightforward as you go through. We've got our direct object here, zavach, but we've got a hirik yod on the end, so this has a pronominal suffix. So instead of just zevach, sacrifice, it would be my sacrifice. And then, so again, you can translate that through. I only want to pick out sort of the more interesting aspects of this. The next one here, matzati, pretty much what you'd expect from matzah in the 1CP cal perfect form. So the next one, we don't have a subject. The et indicates we've got a direct object, so we probably don't have an explicit subject. So this would simply be I found, and then hakesef, the silver, which, bamakom, so this is which was or which is in the place, hahu, in that place. Again, we have to supply that was or is, that to be verb here, because to just translate this as I found the money or the silver which in that place doesn't make any sense in English. So we have to supply the to be verb there. This one's really straightforward. I'm not going to spend time on this. Number 5 is longer, so we'll take a look at it here. Ba'et hahi tirosh et ha-Elohim ha-kayim bekol livecha uvekol nafshecha. So, what do we got here? Let's kind of look through. Again, we've got some unfamiliarity, so we want to kind of just take it one step at a time, looking at our first word. We usually expect to start with a verb, so let's see if this could be a verb. If this is a verb, it's either the root, beit, ayin, tav, but it's a weird vowel pattern for it to be cal perfect. Now, beit is not any sort of imperfect prefix, so it would be weird for it to be imperfect as well. So this is probably not a verb. The only other, tav just by itself with the 8 here. This vowel pattern tells you that this is probably not a verb. There's just not a verb that's going to have this vowel pattern. So if it's not a verb, what else do we have? Well, could this be a noun? Some nouns may, this is a weird vowel pattern for a noun as well. So probably not a noun, but we can go look up beit, ayin, tav and see if anything comes up in our lexicon. Or we can take the beit as a preposition. So the beit here, and then the kametz underneath of it would be explained as a definite article preceding a guttural. In this case, the guttural cannot take a dagesh, and so the definite article patach would lengthen to a kametz. So we've got the beit preposition, a definite article, and then we've got the word 8. And 8 you should recognize from your vocabulary as the word for time. So this would basically mean in the time, that one. Here we've got a feminine singular demonstrative. We know it's a demonstrative because it has an article on it. This is modifying attributively time, because this also has a definite article. But 8 is one of those irregular looking nouns in that it's not obviously feminine. So ha-he tells us that in that time, or since it's talking about time, we might say at that time. At that time. Now we got to figure out what this word is. Now usually, following a temporal clause, we would expect a verbal clause. Let's see what we get. So here we have tidrosh. It's hard to do the dalet and the rolling R, rolling resh here, but tidrosh for the English speakers, tidrosh. We've got 4 letters here. It's not a noun that we recognize, but it could be a verb with a prefix or a suffix. Well, shin never functions as a suffix, so maybe tav is a prefix. Sure enough, tav hirik is an imperfect prefix for second person. And so this is either the imperfect, cal imperfect, 2ms or 3fs form of darash, which is to look for, to search for. In this case, he translates it as seek. So since it's imperfect, this is going to be will seek. And let's see if the subject is made explicit, because right now it could either be she will seek or you, sir, will seek. Of course, next we get our definite direct object, so we don't have an explicit subject, it looks like. So either at that time, she will seek the god ha-kayim. Kai is the adjective living, and so since it matches masculine plural definite, this is going to be she will seek the living God, or you will seek the living God. Bechol livecha. Bekol livecha. Should be libecha. This is going to be a hard B sound because of the dagesh here. This is a doubling dagesh because it's preceded by a vowel. Libecha u vechol nafshecha. So let's leave this alone for a minute and just come down here and try to translate these phrases. Again, verb probably not going to have a makef here. So this is more likely going to be an adjective or a noun or something like that. Bechol should be relatively familiar. This is 2 words we know. This is the preposition beit and the adjective kol. So bechol is going to be in all or at all, or in this case with all, because beit is going to function sort of instrumentally. And then libecha, this is a different one that you're not going to recognize by paying a lot of attention to the vowels here. If you erase the vowels, you might notice a lamed and a beit, and then you've got a kaf kametz at the end. Kaf kametz is often explained as the pronominal, the 2ms pronominal suffix. So we're left with lamed beit. Now this could either be lamed preposition plus, a word based on beit kaf, or this could be a kaf pronominal suffix based off of a word with a lamed beit. Well, we don't really know any vocabulary words that are beit kaf, at least none are coming to mind. So if we take the lamed beit approach, are there any vocabulary words that we recognize with lamed beit? Well, lev or levav would be one. And here levav does that interesting thing where the second beit takes the form of a dagesh within the first beit, and the vowel here shifts to a hirik when you have a suffix. So libecha, is an unusual form, but it means your heart. Well, there we go. That tells us, this second person pronominal suffix tells us that this should probably be the 2ms form rather than the 3fs form. So now we can go back and translate this as, at that time, you, sir, you, masculine, you will seek the living God with all of the heart of you, so with all of your heart, and bechol, with all, uvechol, with all, the soul of you. And you say, well, where is the definite article here for the heart of you and the soul of you? We don't need a definite article. The pronominal suffix indicates that this is definite. So the heart of you and the nefesh of you. Nafshecha is your soul. So altogether we have, at that time, you will seek the living God with all of your heart and with all of your soul. Obviously, you don't have to include the ofs here. Those are understood in English, but just bringing out the fact that these are in construct. All right. So we'll look at number 6 here as well because it has that comparative adjective idea that some of you have struggled with. So just looking here word by word, we've got kezachim. This is a tricky one. Hopefully the hirik yod mem ending will alert you to the fact that this is a masculine plural noun. Otherwise, if you try to assume that this is a verb, you're going to have some trouble. First of all, there's way too many letters for it to be a verb that we would recognize. Mem is only part of a suffix with tav in the cow perfect, 2mp and 2fp, so this is not a suffix. And then het never functions as a prefix, so this isn't any sort of verb that we're going to recognize with 4 consonants and a yod in there. However, as a noun, if we take off the hirik yod mem ending, we get chazak. Now we should recognize chazak as the chet, zayin, kof root, which you can build a verb off of. He was strong. But here with the hirik yod mem ending, this is actually going to be the adjective form. And I said noun, but the hirik yod mem also goes on adjective. So here we've got the adjective strong with a hirik yod mem indicating that this is modifying a masculine plural noun. So next we've got avdei. We know that the dagesh here, the shavah here is silent because it's preceded by a short vowel. So avdei is the masculine plural construct form of eved. And I know that that can be a little bit confusing because you've got a patak here instead of a segel. But again, if you ignore the vowels for a moment and you just look at ayin, beit, dalet, you will recognize that root as eved, or avad for he served. But here with the sere yod ending, this is a dead giveaway that we've got a masculine plural construct form. Now, it's construct, so we need to pay attention to what follows it. What is it being constructed to? Well, here we've got a definite article, hamelech, so that tells us this is the absolute. So this ends the construct chain because you can't have a definite article on a construct noun. And we also know that this is definite because the definiteness of each construct is determined by the definiteness of its absolute. So here we actually have the servants, plural, because this is masculine plural ending, the servants of the king. So now that we have the servants of the king, we can figure out where kazachim fits into the phrase. Since kazachim is plural, it needs to modify a plural noun, so it will not modify the king, it will modify servants, because this is also masculine plural. So, what we have here with this phrase is the strong servants of the king and then we run into a problem. And we'll see what that is here. So here we've got a really strange looking word. Again, if we're asking what stands out, like what can we take away to get to the root? Well, if we look at the end and the beginning, we notice the segel yod suffix here, this masculine plural suffix for the construct. That tells us that this is not part of the root. So now we've got mem, ayin, bait, dalet. Is there any way to take this mem off as a prefix? Well, as it happens, the mem prefix is often the min prefix, and we know that because we've got the heric lengthening to a sere here. What has happened is we would have had a min squished onto evid, and the nun would have assimilated into the ayin with a dagesh, but unfortunately the ayin cannot take a dagesh, and so the nun just has to drop out. And since the nun drops out, this heric is going to lengthen to the sere. So this mem sere prefix is actually the min preposition. Now, that's important to remember because we've got adjectives in play, and whenever we have adjectives in play with min, we're treading on the territory of a comparative adjective. So let's just translate this. We've got this phrase translated. Let's translate this phrase and now see if we have to change anything to put it all together. So this phrase here is going to say, from servants of HaKohen, the priest. So there is no definite article here. So this is just from servants of the priest, but this is definite because the reason why there's no definite article is its construct. It is definite because its absolute is definite. HaKohen is definite. So the priest means we have the servants of the priest. So the servants of the priest. We had the strong servants of the king, and now we have from the servants of the priest. The problem is if we just try to translate all this together, the strong servants of the king from the strong servants of the the strong servants of the king from the servants of the priest, that doesn't mean anything. We could put a to be verb in here. The strong servants of the king are from the servants of the priest, but again, that's not a great sentence. And the fact that we've got a min preposition on a noun with adjectives, that tells us that we're probably in comparative territory. So how would we translate this comparatively? Well, the formula for this is we would do a predicative adjective on the front here. So here, and actually we should have, I missed this when I was going through the first part, we should have recognized the fact I didn't because neither of these have a definite article, but technically this noun is definite because it's part of the construct phrase here. So the fact that this is missing the definite article, because this is not part of the construct phrase, it's an adjective, that tells us that this is a predicative noun. So what we've really got here is the sentence, strong are the servants of the king from the servants of the priest. Okay, that gives you a much better sort of sense that what we've got going on here is a comparative adjective. Strong are the servants of the king from the servants of the priest. So anytime we've got from with this sort of adjective relationship, we're comparing. We're comparing the servants of the king with the servants of the priest, and the aspect, the quality that we're comparing is strength. So the way we say that in English is simply, I mean, again, this is not a literal, we're not going for a literal translation here. If If we were going for a literal translation, it wouldn't make any sense. The servants of the king are strong from the servants of the priest. That would almost say that the servants of the priest are making the servants of the king strong. That's just not the way that it works. So in English, we have to completely reword this in order to get the meaning out. And this is why it's so important to understand the place that literal translation philosophy has and the place that functional translation philosophy has. A literal translation does not make any sense here. If by literal we mean word for word. Again, we can define literal in a lot of different ways, but this is where we need an idiomatic translation. This is where we need a functional translation that brings out the meaning rather than the corresponding word to word. If you're going to give a literal translation of men as from, you're not going to get a good English translation. There is a place for literal translation and it being good translation, and there is a place for functional translation being good translation. You cannot assume that a literal translation is better than a functional translation. All right, so translating this functionally, what the meaning is, we have the servants of the king are stronger than the servants of the priest. Or the king's servants are stronger than the priest's servants. All right, so I'll go ahead and stop there. We're over 70 minutes so far. Let me make sure that was the... Oh, we've also got activity H. So let's just take a look at these. These are the ones that are tricky for me because the way that my screen displays, it's hard to know where the breaks are, but I'm pretty sure that this... Oh, goodness. That's number 1. This is number 2, and then this is number 3. So looking at these real quick, I'm not sure what this note. I'm really not sure if Sisera is standing in for a word that's in the text or if this refers to Sisera. But anyways, we've got this. All right, so next we see beyadecha, and that's a lot going on here, but bait preposition, yad, hand, and then echa. This is that 2ms pronominal suffix, so this would be in your hand. So let's say this in your hand doesn't make sense, so maybe it's supposed to be this Sisera in your hand. So it's either this Sisera who is in your hand or this Sisera. We'll just keep going and see what happens. This Sisera in your hand, Hayom means today, which Natan is he gave. Here's our subject, Adonai or Yahweh, the Lord, which the Lord gave. Oh, here we go. This, if you look at this, Sisera. So here it is down here. I don't know why in the world it's all the way up here. But this in your hand today, which the Lord gave you, Sisera. I really feel like my word order has got to be off because that is a funky word order. But that's sort of the translation of each of the words. Let's try to make it make sense. So maybe this is... let's start with our main verb. That's always a safe place to go. Of course, this isn't our main verb. This is the main verb, or this is the relative verb for the relative clause. So, which the Lord gave Sisera. Sisera is the direct object, so which the Lord gave. Again, the problem is Sisera isn't, if I'm translating this correctly, Sisera isn't a direct object. It would be an indirect object, in which case et would be marking an indirect object. And I wasn't aware that et can do that, but maybe et isn't a direct object marker. Maybe et is just an object marker, and it happens to be the indirect object. If Sisera is receiving something, then Sisera is not the direct object. If Sisera is being given, especially if Sisera is being given in your hand today, but that would give us a completely different word order. Let's go ahead and see what the word order is in Judges 4:14. Pull that up here. So here, Vatomer, so, and you, Devra, is that Devorah? So basically, and you, so this is Deborah, and Deborah said to Barak, come because Zehayom. Okay, so here we go. It was a totally different word order. So Zehayom Asher, it must have been the fact that the English was messing up here. So the actual word order is Zehayom Asher. So let's look at it here. Zehayom, so this day, which, maybe this is the day when Yahweh gave Sisera into your hands. That makes way more sense. Here Sisera is actually a direct object because Sisera is being given. He's not an indirect object. He's not receiving. He's being given. So, Zehayom, this day, this is the day. I'm going to because Hayom is definite, Zeh is not definite, so this is going to be predicative. So this is the day. You could say which. This is the day which Yahweh gave Sisera into the hand of you. But I'm actually going to, there's a couple different ways. You could say this is the day on which you couldn't just say which. You need to either say on which, this is the day on which Yahweh gave Sisera into your hands, or you could simply say this is the day that Yahweh gave Sisera into your hand, or you could even say this is the day when Yahweh gave Sisera into your hand. So it depends on the perspective. If this is reported from a long time ago, then this is the day when makes more sense. But if this is actually happening, I might say this is the day on which the Lord has given. So anyways, yeah, that's that. Again, let's look at the actual Hebrew since we've got some English in there. Genesis. Genesis 15:18. All right. Berit, Bayom. Okay, so 18. Bayom. So Bayom, we've got on or in or at the day. Hahu. So on that day, both of these are definite, so it's attributive. On that day, Adonai cut, Parat, Adonai cut or made with Abraham. Now, this is a great example of where et is the preposition with and not the definite direct object. And here's how I know. He didn't cut Abraham. He cut with Abraham a berit. He cut with Abraham a covenant saying, Lamor. You're not going to recognize this, but this is from Amar to say. So Lamor, it means saying such and such. Okay, so let's look back at what this has. On this day, on that day, cut Yahweh with Abraham a covenant. So again, I don't know why it shoots it all the way up there, but it does. Hopefully this one makes more sense. Zot, Briti, Ashur, Tishmeru. Yep, so this makes sense just as it is. Zot, again, no definite article here, so this is going to be predicative. This is Briti. Now you might say, well, it could be attributive because they both match indefiniteness. Neither has the definite article. But Briti is from Berit, which has the pronominal suffix, the 1cs pronominal suffix. That pronominal suffix makes this definite even though it doesn't have the definite article. So these do not match indefiniteness. This is predicative. This is my covenant, which Tishmeru. So here we've got the tav prefix and the shuric suffix. That indicates a cal imperfect. This is a cal imperfect 2MP. So this will be you will, and then shamar is he kept, so you will keep or you will guard. This is my covenant which you will keep or you will guard or you will observe. So those are our answers there. All right.